Welcome to Sabbath Collective. We're a community of people gathering on the Sabbath who are interested in pursuing God through an ancient Hebraic worldview of Scripture. And tonight we'll look at the joy in Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. Sukkot's primary theme and goal is to achieve a kind of climactic joy, which I'm not sure about you, but that sounds pretty good, right? Hey Phoebe, great to have you with us from California. Good to have you. Shabbat Shalom. So the main mitzvah is to be exceedingly joyful in the time of Sukkot. Deuteronomy 16:14 says, "You shall rejoice." And then in verse 15, it says, "You shall be full of joy." And then there's a request for a blessing for Zaman Simchatenu, which is the season of our joy. So there are a lot of really interesting rituals in the celebration of this holiday, but the main theme is joy. How can God command humans to have joy? Okay, how can there be a commandment to be joyful? Well, since he never tells us to do what we're unable to do, it suggests that we can have joy on command. And joy is different than happy. Joy revolves around a sort of connecting to truths, not necessarily a reaction to an external stimulus like happy is. Sukkot is simply the awareness and connection to freedom, God's provisions, as well as the possibility of a different future, which I think we would all love to think about. Hey, Randall, good to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Great. Hope the family's well. So, the Feast of Tabernacles, also called the Feast of Booths. I have to say that really specific because some people say, oh, that sounds good. The Feast of Booths, not booze. Booths, B-O-O-T-H-S. The Feast of Ingathering is another name that it's called, and it's the last festival from the Leviticus 23 calendar. It's sort of the end of the agricultural year. It's a 7-day harvest celebration. The Hebrew name of the festival is Sukkot, which is plural of the word sukkah, which means shelter or huts. It's the sort of culmination of all the other festivals, sort of like the Sabbath is to the end of the week. Sukkot actually has a few names connected with it, but it comes with or right after Yom Kippur. Now, this is the teaching that I tried to do last week, but wasn't able to do. So Yom Kippur is the holiday that comes before Sukkot. In Hebrew, one of the names is Yom Kippurim, which means Day of Atonements, and Kafar, which is directly related to Kippur. So let's just take a look at these names real quick. So we have, again, the holiday before Sukkot, which was last week. We have the names Yom Kippur, and again, this is Yom Kippurim, another Hebrew word, which means Day of Atonements, Kafar, and Kippur. So these four sort of phrases are connected with the holiday right before Sukkot, Yom Kippur. Now, this is connected where we're just coming out of Yom Kippur. So Kafar is used about 150 times in Scripture. But there is some interpretational problems that Western Christianity has with this word, kafar. There's an equivalent Arabic root. Now let me just get into a little bit of a linguistic tech part here. It's only going to take 10 seconds, so bear with me. There's a similar or equivalent Arabic root to this word kafar. And Arabic is what's called a cognate language, which sort of means a sister language with a common ancestor, almost like cousins, right? So this equivalent root means to conceal. And on the basis of this sister word, Western scholars have assumed that the Hebrew word kafar means to conceal or cover over sin. Okay, so Western theologians looked at these words that were connected around Yom Kippur, the previous holiday, which has to do with forgiveness, atonement for sin. And they said, oh, because this word is connected to this word, it means to cover over sin. But the word atonement does not mean to cover over sin in the way we think of it. So let me give you an example of this. If I cover this over, right, you can't necessarily read it, right? But you still know it's there. It still takes up space. There's still an object here. Maybe you can't see what's underneath of it, but it's still taking space. It's still holding space. Kafar does not mean to conceal, the Hebrew concept. It means remove, as it's gone. Now, when I used to do in-person services, maybe a couple of you remember that I used to do a little magic trick to explain Yom Kippur, where I had what looked like a champagne bottle, and I would put the cover over it, and then it was covered. And when I explained the biblical concept, the Hebrew concept of the word kafar, it actually was a trick bottle, and it would smash down to nothing and be gone. That's the concept. It's gone. It means remove. With biblical atonement, the sin is not simply covered up. It is removed by means of a substitute. Now, in Leviticus 16, we read of a scapegoat ritual where the sins of the people were symbolically pressed down upon a goat. And the goat, called the scapegoat, carried those sins away into the wilderness. So in other words, the sins are transferred onto a substitute and then taken away. They are removed. They're not covered over. As we understand, the ultimate Passover lamb is Yeshua, and he did this for humanity. If the followers of Yahweh are reminded on Yom Kippur, which again just happened, that sins have been removed, not just covered over, but removed, then Sukkot, the holiday we're in now, is the culmination of all that is dreamed of. People enter into this holiday in a sort of freedom and celebrate it with the understanding that it all comes from God. So, how can we not be joyful with this understanding? There is something significant about God's directive to be exceedingly joyous on Sukkot. It's this sort of idea of transcending oneself and our own issues, right? So we sort of rise above them and we move into new possibilities. After Yom Kippur is over, there's a coming out then from the inside of a building to the outside into the sukkahs outdoors. And these are quite literally open structures, okay? And for those of you who have seen them, we used to always post pictures in New York, and even people that live in apartment buildings would sort of make sukkahs on their terraces, on the 10th floor, 11th floor, 12th floor. It's an open structure where meals are shared. Oftentimes people camp almost in the structure, but it has open weave top and sides. And the Sukkot ritual is based on the biblical commandment that Israelites dwell in temporary huts for 1 week a year. And again, just to remind you, the biblical festivals that we read about, this kind of rhythm is to connect people to truths about God and about their own journey. And so it happens rhythmically because this is a good way to celebrate and remember. In Leviticus 23, verse 43, we kind of read about this description. In order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, I, the eternal, your God. So in other words, this is to be done for a week each year to connect the Jewish people to their history, but more importantly, to who God is in them and who they are in the world. Now, being outside in nature is beautiful, right? But doing that in the sort of insecurity of sukkahs is a ritual reminding the Jewish people of their journey out of Egypt, of God's provisions for them, and connection to their place in the universe. And there's really no better way to embrace our place in the larger universe than leaving our security of our homes and going outside. Whatever the weather it is outside, it is a reality that can affect us. It's beyond our control. This sort of letting go of our capacity to control everything and moving into the open world with a confident trust can be a source of great joy because, again, we connect to the remembering of who God is. The joy of the journey of the Jewish people after God set them free was actually challenged daily for them after their exodus, right? Because they build their tents only to have to take them down and they have to keep moving. And that constantly tested their faith and their commitment to God's leading and provision in the journey because they were always on the move. I don't know how many of you have felt that in your own lives, but it can be very challenging, right? As Rabbi Yitzhak Greenberg writes, and this is a really great quote that I am going to post so you can read it later, it is relatively easy to rise to one peak moment of courageous commitment, right? Those are those like hero moments, right? Most of us can kind of pull that off, right? If it's one peak moment of courageous commitment. He goes on, it is more taxing and more heroic to wrestle with everyday obstacles without highs or diversions. Okay, this is just everyday life. True maturity means learning to appreciate the finite rewards of every day along the way. Whew, that's a true truth right there, right? And this is really what the huts symbolize. It's the mundane of life where you're exposed to things outside of your control and really trusting God in the whole process of the journey. Now, I'm wondering how many of us feel like we may be in that place right now. I mean, we're in that place right now. We're in a hut. We're outside. We're exposed to the elements. We don't know what's coming next. And we are literally dependent upon God for everything, even our shelter, which in Western culture, we're not quite used to depending on God for that, right? And this is the connection to remember. So joy is an attitude. It's a relationship with life. It's a decision. Joy is a spiritual practice. How does Sukkot help us choose joy? By connecting us to our own need and our own awareness of that need for His care. And really, when we just do the simple things of being outside in the sukkah and realizing how primary it is for us to kind of want security, want safety, and control our own lives, this connects us to joy when we're able to release that. When we awaken to our reliance upon Adonai and the illusion of our own control and our security, that melts away. And mind you, any sense of control and our own security is an illusion because we really don't have it, do we? We can plan, we can manage, we can do all that we know to do, and we can hold on very tightly. But it's all an illusion because we really can't control any of it. Ultimately, we are reliant upon God for our provisions, for our security, for our safety, for everything. We're relying upon God. So this holiday connects us to that remembrance, and connecting to that remembrance causes us to have joy. Okay. So here is kind of a big aha, okay, with this. What you cannot control is your teacher. And I want to ask you if you've had any experience with this personally in your own life. What you cannot control is your teacher. So if you wouldn't mind sharing in the comments, maybe in your personal lives, what things you've realized that you cannot control. And if you feel comfortable to share, what those things taught you. What you cannot control is your teacher. That's huge. Because we look at it, again, if we can't control something, we look at it, well, how can we manage better? Or then we get into that war mentality, right? We're at war and this is an adversary and we have to resist and we have to fight and we have to battle. And it's all for that sake of control. But what you cannot control is your teacher. It's actually a gift to you. And the whole point of God having the Jewish people remember this holiday is this, that they can't control anything. What we cannot control is our teacher. So let me see in the comments, if you feel comfortable sharing this, what you have not been able to control in your life. Maybe it's your finances, maybe it's your job, maybe it's your children, maybe it's your spouse, whatever it is. Maybe it's the weather. Phoebe lives in California. There's wildfires there all the time. She can't control the wildfires, and sometimes she can smell the smoke and see the smoke. And she has animals and a house, and her husband sometimes find themselves in a dangerous path. What has that taught you? Phoebe, I'm asking you. What has that taught you? So again, it's teaching us how to let go, how to give, and how to trust. But all these things that we're unable to control is really what are our teachers. And we need to thank them for their presence in our life. We need to thank them for their existence because they literally are our teachers. Again, they're not challenges or obstacles that we need to climb over and overcome and war against. They're literally our teachers. And so we say, thank you very much for this teacher. And I'm learning. Stephanie says, my mother's dementia. Oh, that's beautiful, Stephanie, because wow, talk about out of control, right? No one can control that. And there's so much emotions with that issue, Stephanie, I know. So Stephanie is saying her mother's dementia is out of her control, but also her mother's dementia is her teacher. And so there's a sense of even being grateful for what you're learning. Catherine, hey, Katie, good to have you with us. Katie says, I cannot control the thoughts and actions of others. Oh, gosh, so true. Really good one, right? We can't control the thoughts and actions of others. And so when they do things that we think are stupid or hurtful or dangerous, what can we learn from those behaviors? We actually thank God that there are teachers in those experiences. And those teachers have come to us to teach us things. And we need to be grateful. Randall said the co-op's management executive lack of response. As I'm not sure about what the rest of the country's experiences with condo and co-op boards, but I know in New York, this is a big one for many a person. And basically it's because a lot of times the people that are running very serious things this is a great example, Randall, where your finances are connected to. In other words, it's your investment, it's your future and all that. And people that may not know what the heck they're doing are making decisions or not making decisions that are directly affecting your quality of life and your financial investment. This is really frustrating, and you literally feel like you have no control. And so again, what are the teachers in this frustration and this lack of control teaching you? That's a great example. Phoebe says, people, places, and things. Yep, absolutely. We have no control over any of them. That's exactly right. Good example, Phoebes. So it's teaching us how to let go. Hey, Beth, great to have you with us. This is so timely and needed, Beth is saying. Everyone I've spoken to the last week across the country has been low-key depressed or feel defeated. Feeling out of control is a big part of it. Oh, thank you, Beth, for sharing that. Beth, as you most of you know, is a chaplain and deals with people that are in the process of crossing over and their families and in hospital care. And so this is obviously a big issue. And she's also a citizen of the world. So I'm sure you're hearing your friends talk about this as well. Yeah, you could feel it. It's kind of palpable. And what we tend to do as human beings, and I'm one of them, I mean, I'm getting ready to do some really big changes in my life now. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and my brain's going, I have to do this, I have to do this. What if this happens? What if this happens? Like the hamster on the wheel, right? And I'm literally like almost trying to grab things in my dream and my sleep. And when I wake up, I'm trying to entrain myself to let them go. I'm a pretty organized person. Dreaming about what I have to do probably isn't going to add any more knowledge, okay? I need to be sleeping and my brain needs to be healing, okay, and washing, not planning. So again, this is my sense of I don't have control. There's so many things I can't possibly have control. And that can make you depressed, that can make you in fight or flight, that can make you have anxiety, all these things. But if we look at it like actually the loss of control or lack of control is the point. And God specifically led his people into 1 week a year of just focusing on this. And then that should cause them to have joy. That's a huge lesson for us. And I don't find, that this doesn't escape me, Beth, that you're saying you're hearing this week of Sukkot. Because somehow, whether you are practicing this biblical holiday or not, there's a spiritual energy to it that's alive in the world. Randall says the incident inside the facility I work within that causes alarms, freezing my movement. Exactly. So yeah, this is definitely something bigger outside affecting you, and you have no control over it. Again, teaching us how to let go, how to give, how to trust. There are a lot of spiritual practices in Sukkot, especially when we look at it in Bible times, when it was celebrated in the temple and there was a gathering where people came from all over. They came for three festivals a year. One of them was Sukkot. And it was like pageants. It just went on, and it was a thing of beauty and celebration. And we've talked a lot about all the different elements over the years, but tonight I just want to reconnect us to two, because the principles in these two really tie together with this sense of I have no control. So two elements in this holiday in temple times. One is they involve giving, and one is water. So I want to just look at these two. Now, the first one is in Deuteronomy 16, verses 16 and 17a. And it says this: 3 times a year, all your men are to appear in the presence of Adonai your God in the place which he will choose. By the way, this is the temple, the tabernacle. This is 3 times a year. They are not to show up before Adonai empty-handed, but every man is to give what he can in accordance with the blessing Adonai your God has given you. So this is a really interesting practice that's part of all the festivals, all 3 of the main festivals. There is an offering, a giving of food from the harvest. And this giving of food, when they would make their harvest, they would take from their harvest and they would bring it to the temple as part of this celebration. And it was used for the priests that sort of took care of the people's religious obligations, because it was messy work what the priests did, okay? They didn't just show up and preach a sermon and walk off the stage and go home. There was a lot of physicality to what it was, and spiritual and emotional work that the priests did on behalf of the people. And this provided for the priests to be able to help with the people's religious obligations and the gatherings. And it also provided for the priests' families, and it took care of the priests when they were retired. This was a tithing from the harvest. So it is out of a knowing. I want us to connect to this, because many of us are really feeling financially insecure during these times because of the pandemic and how many people have lost their jobs, or their jobs have changed, or maybe their financial investments have changed. They're feeling a sort of financial insecurity. And look, this was a harvest that celebrated, or this was a festival that celebrated the harvest. And they were asking God to bless them with the next harvest. So what is the point of them when they come here and they're giving food? It's the whole thing again, that I don't have control. Even though I'm working in my field, I'm planting the seeds and I'm making sure that they're taken care of and the animals don't eat them, and I'm doing all that, and I'm working to bring the harvest, but I ultimately trust that it's God that gives me my provisions. And so I'm going to give out of that trust. So it is a knowing, out of a knowing that everything that sustains life comes from God. So it's a letting go of control. Because if you have, let's look at it like this. If you feel like, I got $100 and I don't know where I'm going to get another $100 from. Okay? Maybe you have a financial insecurity. I have $100 and I don't know where I'm going to get another $100 from. And God says, hey, I want you to give this $10. I want you to bring it to the temple so that the priest can continue to teach you and make sacrifices for you and be with your family and do your weddings and all that. It's hard when you only have that $100, right? But here this is about this letting go of control, because what you want to do with that $100 is put it in the bank, or make sure that you have it so that you don't know when and more is coming. It's the same with food. I know we don't get food because we're not farmers, but food is money, okay? So if we relate to this in money, we'll get how the farmers felt, okay? So again, this really was a letting go. A second interesting practice in the Sukkot celebration involves water, and it was called the water libation ceremony. Now, the anticipation of rain is reflected in all these temple services. Water is life. And again, we don't fully get that either, because we walk into our kitchen and turn on the tap and there we have water. But this is desert. And water is rare, okay? And water is seasonal. And if they miss the season, they don't eat. If they don't have rain, they don't eat. If they don't have rain, they die, because you need water to live, right? So water is life, and to them, it comes from God. So each morning of the Tabernacles services, a sacrificial pouring out of water was offered to the Lord as a sort of visual prayer for rain. Isn't that beautiful? So they were all praying and singing and dancing and making all this music and singing all these hymns and thanking God for their food and thanking God for the water he was going to bring. But the thing that they were asking for, they also gave back to him. So it was the ultimate experience of letting go of what you really want to control and manage. Isn't that amazing? So let's look at the depth of this. With water. The Hebrew word for water is ma'im. Ma'im. And again, that's the Hebrew word for water. But it comes from the word for heaven, shamayim. You see how the root in the word heaven is water? So water literally comes from heaven. Okay? Water comes from heaven. That's basically what they believed, what they thought, what they knew. And water comes from Yahweh. No water, no life. And the gathering acknowledges the need for God to provide the necessary elements for their life. Now, again, take notice. What were the people asking for? Crops and water. What did the people offer the Lord? Crops and water. Now, let's get a little bigger than life-sustaining things for us, okay? Which it's important that we look at it like that too. But let's look at other more emotional concepts. What about mercy? Whether it's mercy that we give and then mercy that we're asking for to receive, or love that we give because we're asking for love to receive, the law of sowing and reaping is a very real principle connected to a spiritual practice, right? And we see this here. But what we may miss is how much control is involved in these things. Sometimes when we really, really, really want love, we feel like we don't have enough of it, so we're very stingy with our love. We don't freely give our love because we're afraid we don't have enough. So we don't trust and we don't share with people our love because we think, well, I need this for me. I don't have enough love. I need this. So we tend to guard and hold on to very tightly what we feel we have a scarcity of, right? But here this celebration is telling us it's really about letting go. Because control is an illusion anyway. And every year, the people came together to connect to this spiritual practice that reminded them of this truth. And when they were reminded of it, it caused them to connect to joy. Remembering is so important to our faith. Brene Brown notes, joyous people are grateful people. And so to be grateful, we have to have rhythms of remembering. And this includes looking back at what he's given us and looking forward to what we're trusting him for. But also within this practice, it's the letting go of the very things that we're desiring, that we're praying for. Forgiveness, compassion, mercy, grace, patience. It's the letting go and sharing with the very things that we're praying for. It's a big time to connect to joy in that practice. So we're going to close our time with the lighting of the Shavuos candles. And traditionally, the mothers of the home light the Sabbath candles that connect us to the light of peace and joy and unity. And then she encircles the candles as a gesture that welcomes in the Sabbath 3 times. The Lord is our source. May we remember, connect, let go, and celebrate this truth. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.